It's kind of cool. I've known our guest today since I was 14. I was a freshman in high school. He was a sophomore in high school. I've, of course, been a year behind him ever since. I was a year behind him in law school, and he started his firm a little bit before I started mine. And so it just underscores the importance of having people who you can follow in their footsteps, and they'll mentor you. And it's really important to have those relationships. So it's a great conversation today with Jonathan Langer. This is How to Start and Run a Law Firm. I'm Mark Lyda. Let's dive in. My guest today is Jonathan Langer. He's a founder and managing partner of Crest Point Law here in Colorado. He attended Williams College and the University of Colorado Law School. He then went to Big Law, working at Baker Hostetler. In 2012, he decided to take a more entrepreneurial approach to the practice of law. And John, I want you to tell the story of how that evolved into getting your own thing up and running and what you're doing now. So first of all, hello and welcome.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. So as you said, I started out at Big Law and had a great opportunity to work at Baker Hostetler with some great M&A attorneys. And they also have an excellent litigation and tax group. And it was a good experience to get to learn the nuts and bolts of M&A work at the time. And it was also an opportunity to click through a bunch of documents they found in the basement of Bernie Madoff's office. So I got to do that my first year. Wow. But it really, yeah. But at the same time, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs who are the small business owners here in Colorado. And I realized that, the M&A law was interesting, but my passion was really, my passion and my contacts were really more in the small business world, which turned out it wasn't as good of a fit for Baker Hostetler and the bigger law firms. So, it became clear that really not in order to cultivate my network and to utilize my background, that being somewhere smaller was going to be important, with just a little bit more flexibility on rates and risk profiles and things like that. So just asked around and ended up finding someone who had been practicing as a solo practitioner in business law for a while. And his practice had grown to the point where he needed an associate. And it turns out that highly trained third years are pretty coveted assets, which I didn't fully know at the time, but now that I'm running my own law firm, those are really helpful people to find. So if anyone out there wants a job, let me know. So anyways, I worked with that senior partner for a while, kind of coming in as an associate, but sort of knowing that I was going to be on a partner track. And really, he and I worked together, and I ended up doing a fair amount to really turn it from a solo practice into more of a law firm. Because there's a lot of just logistics that you need, which is, I'm sure, part of what you're providing on this podcast. But right, like just little things like, more than one person being able to get into the billing software to send out invoices or track collections, and a little bit more robust accounting systems. Because with partnership pass-through taxation and the way a lot of law firms are structured, it's important to kind of know where revenue is and how you're going to allocate that. So just some more structure on that side of it too. So really just, kind of over time, we were just building those structures, and we brought a few more people in, and really just sort of, grew into a full-fledged law firm where we are now.
Yeah. Okay. And then at some point you made the transition. I guess he retired.
Yeah. He retired. And so the law firm at this point, and that was a big change. I mean, I think, there was a lot of, the pandemic was a change vector in a lot of different areas, and our firm was included, that, because I think some differences in priorities, and, growth mindset and those kinds of things between someone who was nearing retirement and, there's at that point, there was a few of my CU law class of 2009 classmates, and we were really kind of in more of a growth mindset. So there were some differences on trajectory. And so, just basically, so the three of us, me and my two other classmates who were the partners in our firm, kind of went in a different direction. I mean, basically we kept the law firm, it was called as Bickey and Langer for a little bit, and then we rebranded to Crest Point. One, just because it's really, for us, it's not about one particular personality or one person. And so we just wanted to have maybe just more of a brand that worked regardless of who was there. And just, we didn't want to go through changing the name every time someone became a partner, because we are growing and we will have more partners. And so that was just an easy piece on that side. So yeah, and then it was really just, I think the three of us who were a little bit more aligned in where we were in our careers and our practices. And so we've been continuing to do the same focus on M&A and real estate, primarily transactions here in Colorado, but we'll do some bigger stuff out of state also. And yeah, just growing and running a firm called Crestpoint with three partners, two associates. I think we're looking for a third at some point in the future. And it's really been great practicing as a team and really just having this new trajectory.
Okay, first of all, if somebody does want to apply for that job, how do they find you?
You can find us on the internet. We're Crestpoint Law. And yeah, we'd love to have an experienced mid-level associate. So please reach out.
Crestpointlaw.com. All right, cool. And speaking of your partners, I was starting to tell you this before we started recording, but so Kristen Burke, she was your law school classmate in 2000, the class of 2009. I'm 1 year behind all of you, but I've known Kristen since our clerking days, which is like 14 or 15 years ago. And she is the partner of yours that I have known the least amount of time, actually 14 or 15 years, which is really quite a long time. I've known you since I was 14, and I've known Ty McKinstry since I was probably like 5 or 6 or 7 or something. So, because we went to grade school together. So that's fun. And it's fun to see you all succeeding. There's small business and there's small business. One thing that's cool about your firm and that I've always noticed about your practice is, yes, it's generally smaller businesses, but it is sophisticated enterprises, and you all do sophisticated work for small businesses. I think you get a great case for you can be at a small firm and still do sophisticated work.
Absolutely. And really, all three of the partners started at big law firms in different areas. And so we all, I think, bring that pedigree and that expertise to what we're doing now. And yeah, it is fun to work on some pretty sophisticated deals. And, I'm going toe to toe this week with Cooley on a deal and Ballard Spahr on another, and some big law firms. And, they don't really know what to expect when they're dealing with a smaller law firm. I think they sometimes, underestimate you.
Yeah.
And so it's, so that's, it's kind of, so it's just, it's fun to work on those deals, and we can really do these, we do really, big complex stuff. And, I think we, bring that A game that you get with the partners at some of those bigger firms. But, again, we're able to do it. Just our overhead's lower, so our rates can be lower, and we can provide really high level legal services at rates that are well below the partners at some of those firms. And again, I think we can stand up to them on deals. And again, it's deals, right? So we're all working together, but just, we've got tons of reps, on big deals and small deals, and just really kind of know the different tactics. And each deal is different. So, there's different tactics to use depending on your bargaining position and who's on the other side and how badly everyone wants to get the deal done. And so we just had a lot of reps. And yeah, we get to do some fun, sophisticated work. But again, with the kind of being in the smaller firm, and I run the firm, so I can, there's not a policy committee telling me what I can or can't do. I do have to get it by my partners, of course, or not get it by necessarily, but we all bring different backgrounds and have different perspectives. And so I think that team approach is really helpful. And, Kristen has a background at the Supreme Court and doing some litigation work. And then, Ty, in addition to being a real estate lawyer, he owns his own real estate. And so, we all bring our own different perspectives to it. And so, and certainly, we work better as a team than individually. And part of that has been really fun. We've bought a small office building and, have an office where we're all together now. And just really the collegiality, and just the ability to walk into Kristen's office and say, man, this crazy thing happened, or, how did you deal with this last time that occurred? Or just, just being able to talk through that stuff. I think really, it makes all of us practice better. And I think we end up with better work product, and are able to do a better job for our clients when we put our minds together and share our different backgrounds and expertise.
There are a couple really important points within what you said there, particularly for people who are interested in this podcast. One is your rates can be lower because your overhead is lower. So if you're doing the math, what that means is starting your own firm does not necessarily mean you're going to make less money. In fact, it can mean you're making more money. It's just that you're splitting it with fewer people and with fewer vendors because your overhead is lower. People need to realize lower rates doesn't necessarily mean lower amounts of money that you're making. It's not about what your firm makes. It's about what you get to keep. And that math is more in your favor when you're starting your own law firm and you're going out on your own. The other thing that's really important is community. So you get that from partners, but even for solo practitioners, it's important to find some way to have that community. So those are two important points that stood out. Taking it back to when you first took the leap, how did that, was the idea just sort of always in the background because of your parents' entrepreneurial background? So it was always in the back of your mind. And then how you said you asked around to find Julian. How did you even start that process? If somebody is similarly situated to how you were then, what should they do?
Yeah. And at the time, I graduated, one key reference point is I graduated law school in 2009, which, as you know, was the start of the Great Recession. And so, a lot of my classmates had offers from big law firms, and many of them were pulled because law firms just stopped hiring. And so, when I started at Baker Hostetler, my plan was to, be there long-term in their hospitality group. And they still do. And we have to do some of this ourselves with some pretty sophisticated, hotel fractional timeshare work. So when I picked that law firm, I said, man, I'm going to be a part of the hospitality group, and that's going to be my career. And I still actually keep in touch with some of those folks, and they remain advisors. So that was actually plan A, but, plan A went away pretty quickly when, Lehman Brothers crashed, and, just, hotel work, deal work generally really, really dried up. So, it ended up that my experience at Baker wasn't what I had necessarily anticipated. I mentioned earlier that I spent my first year just doing doc review on a bankruptcy case. A pretty juicy bankruptcy case with Bernie Madoff, but nonetheless, it wasn't really, that was plan D. So, and it actually kind of, interestingly then though, we did the business group, because I was going to be just pure real estate hospitality, but the business group ended up, having some juicy M&A work. And so luckily for me, I got some really excellent training in M&A, just because that was where they needed the associates at the time. But that's when when I was doing the M&A work on really big deals for really big companies, that's when the dichotomy appeared. Well, wait a minute, these aren't necessarily my people. So at that point, and I, cause my people, I know a lot of entrepreneurs here in Denver, and they wanted to work with me. They looked at our rate sheet and said, I can't do this. So I, there, on the one hand, I was supposed to cultivate work, but on the other hand, the work I could cultivate wasn't a good fit for the firm. And that was when I said, okay, I need to find a place where I can work with these clients. And yeah, it's Denver's a big city, but it's also still a small town. And also just having grown up here, I sort of went to that network, and I grew up knowing a lot of people and a lot of lawyers. And so just started tapping into that network. And it wasn't necessarily business lawyers that I was looking at, but it was more sort of people just in law generally. And, I knew some people who who were the managing partner at a big firm at the time was someone I'd known from growing up. And I really just started, making some calls and saying, just looking for what was next and really evaluating options. And I wasn't sure, because there still was a universe where, staying at Baker and becoming a partner would have been great. And I just spent about probably 6 months or so just having different calls and chatting with different people. And yeah, one name just kind of kept coming up. His name was Julian Isbicki, who really gave me that opportunity. and really, it kept coming back to him. Interestingly, he just had a really robust small business practice. And I think a lot of people had identified that he really could probably use an associate. So, so on the one hand, so we had called multiple meetings on his side too, where he was, he also had to take the plunge of, taking on the overhead and hiring an associate and doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had multiple conversations. I chatted with some other small firms and big firms. And even, at the time thought about doing, more entrepreneurial stuff where my law degree would be useful, but it wasn't going to be legal services necessarily. So I was evaluating all sorts of different options. And it really just came together, with Julian, that it seemed like that. I mean, that was a really good fit for both of us at the time. And it was helpful that I'd known him from growing up and sort of he was part of a community through, that I'd known through my family. So I think it was also helpful knowing the person that I was taking that plunge with, and kind of vice versa.
Totally.
And I think, so it was really just kind of, it was a long-term process of just trying to find the right fit. I mean, I didn't go through headhunters because that would have landed me probably another big firm job. So yeah, I was really just sort of tapping my network and having a lot of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear from that response is that you took a lot of action. You were in motion. You can't just wait for things to happen to you. You were doing the legwork that was necessary to actually make it happen.
Yeah, and I think, and that hasn't stopped either. Right. I think that
Right.
if you're the kind of person who wants to have their own firm or wants to work as a solo or wants to work in a more entrepreneurial area, you need to cultivate that entrepreneurial side of you. And so, yeah. And there's some people who just, and many of my friends from both college and law school, continue to work at big firms because for them, they just want to, really dial in their specific practice and have, someone else handle all the hard stuff, or all the non-legal services stuff. And that's really great for a lot of people, but, that wasn't really me. I was the guy who wasn't really sure what he was going to do after college and went to law school because that just made sense. And I knew it would be useful and that I could either be a practicing lawyer or what I learned in law school would help me in business going forward. So I'd sort of always, I'd known that about myself. And so for me, then, and certainly now, I really enjoy practicing law and it's fun working on these complex deals. But at least as much I enjoy building businesses and looking at financials and doing strategic planning, and those kinds of things. And especially as I've been, having practiced for 15 years, it's also super fun now for me to be able to train other people in the practice of law. So it's nice that we've got a team who can do the legal services and I'm there helping and supervising and doing the high level stuff. But they're also, my associate right now is working on a purchase agreement while I'm having this conversation with you. So I'm freed up to do more, networking, type and really, growing the business, working on the business versus working in the business, has been fun for me.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way about everything you just said. Anything you can tell us about that juicy bankruptcy, by the way?
This podcast is presented by Practiced, modern law practice management software. We built Practiced at my firm because we were tired of fighting our software, workarounds, clunky systems, way too much admin. So we built our own, and it cut our admin time by over 70%. Practiced makes running a law firm feel lighter. Intake is fast. Engagement letters just work. Time, tasks, and expenses stop piling up. And Practiced's AI assistant can do anything a human assistant can do inside the system. You can also hand it your messy notes, forms, or questionnaires, and it generates clean, polished documents using your templates. Or just forward an email and a new matter appears. Practiced even helps you get more clients through marketing and advanced referral network features. Everything works right out of the box, no separate software for intake and case management, one system, no duct tape. And it's just $20 a month. All features, no add-ons, no nickel and diming. Get started in minutes at practiced.io. That's practist.io.
It was fascinating seeing how just a small handful of people generated so many documents and tricked so many people. Our office in Denver was tasked with trying to find whether anybody else was aware of the fraud. And so, I mean, there are some teams kind of looking at, I mean, this is all public, like looking at the Wilpons and
Yeah.
some big heavy hitters in New York. My job was just to click through the files and, see if anybody could have been reasonably, like if anybody could have known about the fraud. And, but really what I ended up seeing was handwritten notes, from an 80-year-old in Florida. Dear Bernie, thanks for all your great work. I need to make a withdrawal of $20,000 to pay for my grandson's college. Can you please send that to this address? And it was a fax. He sent the money. And a lot of it was just account statements. And, we learned later that they had a software engineer who had reverse engineered. It was a pretty simple software program, but basically Bernie said, well, I need, a 7.2% return this month. So they generated bank statements or not bank statements, like trading statements where, they bought Ford at this price and sold it at this price, and it generated that predetermined return. And and I clicked on, I looked at stock prices. Yeah, Ford was trading at that price that day. So, for the bank statements, it looked like there were real trades being made. And no one, at least none of the people that we saw had any reason to believe that it was a fraud. So it was interesting seeing that the nuts and bolts, and day to day of a exorbitant fraud, and just how, simple stuff, they just put a bunch of simple stuff together and tricked a whole lot of people.
Well, thanks for sharing. And yeah, that's public, like you said. Okay, so back to building the practice. It was a leap to join forces with Julian, but it also sort of eased you in a way. Was that the bigger leap, or when you transitioned to Crest Point Law, what felt like the bigger leap to you?
Certainly the first one. I mean, and from my perspective, I'd been doing all the stuff to grow and become a law firm anyway the whole time. So, like, by the time we became Crest Point, I mean, to me, it was the culmination of stuff that I've been working on for years. So that actually really wasn't a big change. So I think the biggest change was just was really leaving big law for a small practice, and I think at the time it would have been hard for me to have just made a jump to being a solo all by myself, because I just didn't have a book of business. I'm sure I could have found one, but I think it would have been harder. But I jumped into a situation that had very good deal flow, different types of deals, but very strong deal flow. So there was always plenty to do. And it was also helpful because I'd gotten some really excellent training from some great M&A and real estate and securities lawyers. But it was for middle market companies or public companies or, really big stuff on really big deals. And it's a different practice, I think, working for like doing some of these smaller transactions. And, as we're growing, I'm kind of back to doing some of these bigger deals again. And so, it's like full circle to stuff I learned as an associate. Like I'm teaching my associate now about how to do, really complex disclosure schedules or those kinds of things, or how to do a deep dive on diligence. But for me, the biggest learning was how to, my 100-page purchase agreement from Baker Hostetler wasn't going to fly on a smaller Main Street deal. So just learning to drop some issues and focus on what's important.
Interesting.
And just, and really just kind of focusing on, I mean, I tell new clients this, like our core area is like, of course we need to draft and negotiate the purchase agreement. We're happy to help with due diligence, but I'm not going to send my associate down a diligence wormhole unless you tell me to, and unless you need it, because it's your money. Like you might not want to spend that on her time. And so we're here to help, but we're going to stay in our lane, and you're going to tell us when to, expand the scope. So it's just different working with, people who are spending their savings on your legal services, versus a company with a budget line item. It's a different setup.
No kidding. Great point. Okay. So I'm one of the people who took the leap without any book of business whatsoever. And there will be some people probably listening to us who are thinking about doing that. And you eventually did transition into Rainmaker, even if you did it a little gradually and joined somebody who had a book of business. You ultimately have figured out how to bring in cases. So what wisdom can you share on how to bring in cases?
Well, we call them deals.
Deals. Yes. So clients, I should say, for the more universal
clients
term.
and deals.
Yeah.
Clients. My biggest thing is just doing good work. and being a reasonable person. I think that I really like our niche. There's a lot of attorneys in Denver who focus on middle market deals, and not as many attorneys here who focus on the smaller stuff. So partly there's just, I think if you ask around, I think there's only a handful of names who will, come up in Denver for a lot of the SBA deals that we're working on. I'm sure some of those other guys and girls too, Mark. But so really, I think it's just over time, I think we've developed a reputation of doing good work, being priced reasonably and being reasonable people. And I think and that gets our name in the hat when lenders or brokers are looking for referrals, and then just having conversations with clients and, being honest about how we work and really just, because it needs to be a good fit on both sides. And, a lot of times, so we talk to a lot of people and we, convert a lot of leads, but we don't convert every lead because, we might not, we're a great fit for a lot of people, but we're not a perfect fit for everybody. So just, being like telling people about how we practice, how we work, things like that. And, and really it's a relationship of mutual trust and confidence with clients. They need to trust you and you need to trust them. And so
that's right.
It's really establishing an initial rapport is really helpful. I mean, we get a lot of email inquiries, and I always want to follow up with a call or a video conference just to have a conversation and kind of get a sense for who that person is and what they're looking for to make sure it's a mutual fit. So
right.
Yeah. But then just being there and getting the work done and doing well and taking your clients' needs seriously and, taking your fiduciary obligation seriously and all of that is important too. And also, for deal lawyers, people, we don't generally get called until there's a deal that somebody wants to get done. So it's always that balance of knowing that the goal is really to get to closing, because that's why they called you, but then getting to closing on terms that work for everybody. So, some lawyers might jump up and down and say, like, there's some lawyers who just really aren't great for deals. They're too risk averse or too aggressive or whatever. So I think if our goal is to, again, our client's interest is to get the deal done usually. So as long as they're clear and that's their interest, it's getting it done on fair terms, but getting it done.
Yeah. And you're right. Not everybody's a fit. You're not a fit for everybody, but not everybody's a fit for you. And it's really important, I think, especially for solos and small firms, to make sure that they're sort of choosing the right clients, because bad clients can really significantly negatively affect your practice. And I totally agree with you that doing good work is the best business development, but it's also a catch-22 in the beginning, because getting your first few cases, you have to have those to be able to do good work. That's the difficulty, I guess.
Yeah, it's right. I don't just sit, it's not just sitting in your chair and answering the phone, although there's a fair amount of that. And I think, as a practice grows, part of too, I'm practicing for 15 years now, and, we get new people who I talked to 7 years ago come back, and it snowballs, but it's just as you accumulate clients and they tell their friends. And so there's a point at which you get some pretty good momentum. But you got to get yourself out there too. And so, part of it, for what we do, we represent clients on ongoing general business matters. But a lot of what we do is just single transactions where someone who's run a business for 30 years is selling it to somebody else. And so in our space, it's really a matter of making sure that the referral sources know who you are and that you're at the top of their list. So, a big piece of it is identifying who has work to send to lawyers. So in our space, it's lenders and accountants and M&A advisors and business brokers and real estate brokers. And so those are our people for referrals. And so, definitely establishing and maintaining and growing relationships with those people, is helpful. And again, doing good work, like getting someone's deal closed, they're going to want to come back to you. Or, for a lender, just doing it clean and not making it hard for them, they're going to send people towards you. So that's part of it, but you got to find those people in the first place. Absolutely. And that's where networking certainly comes in. And, you know, I also kind of early on, I mean, I mentioned that when I was evaluating whether to, when I was, you know, when I was thinking I might need a lead baker, figuring out what I wanted to do. And that was like 2013 when there was sort of it was the beginning of, the, like, you know, the high local food movement, or like when people, there was just a lot of focus on like,
Yeah.
you know, like backyard gardens and growing local food and local distribution.
Yeah.
And like organic was getting big then. And that was kind of like peak Whole Foods and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to me. I grew up in food and restaurant. And so, one, I was like, maybe I'll start a food distribution company. You know, I'm glad I didn't, because I think the law firm has gone better, but I did sort of identify an industry that I had, that I was just excited about. And I spent time just going to those events and getting to know those people. And I joined a board for a local group. And so, you know, I was able to meet people. I was able to meet other entrepreneurs who were interested in the same industry as I was. And that was a good source of clients. And, you know, joining a board of directors on a nonprofit. I mean, I still keep in touch with some of those folks, and, you know, I'm still doing work for some of those folks too. And they give it into other people. So, so definitely finding a, you know, the place to meet entrepreneurs, who and also, but, you know, don't do it because you're trying to meet entrepreneurs, do it because you're interested in it. But find something you're interested in and show up, and you'll lead people. And, you know, and those are the kind of people too, who you can say, well, look, you know, I haven't really, like, I'm good at this, but I'm not so good at this other thing, or I've never done it before, but I'm sure I can. And, you know, and they just, and that's the kind of person who will take a chance on working with someone who's maybe less experienced, because they know you're passionate about that industry, or maybe you'll give them a good deal on the legal services. And you've shown by showing up at these events that you know what you're talking about, and that you'll be useful in that space. And so, I mean, that's a good way to find, you know, to find new clients, or to grow a book of business when you might not have one.
Those are really, really good points. And people can sense your sincerity, you know, and your authenticity in being there because you're interested in the actual subject. Yeah, that authenticity shines through. And I think that means a lot to people, particularly small business owners, because actually it's not that easy to find a lawyer for people, especially find one that they trust, that they think will charge them a fair amount. So it's about getting in front of those people. And also, absolutely, like you said, finding the people who serve your ideal client in a different way than you're trying to serve that ideal client. So like you mentioned, business brokers. And
exactly.
like
Yeah.
That.
And
Those
really,
are
right. Cause I mean, we need lenders for our clients, and lenders need lawyers for their borrowers. And so it's a mutualism there. And I'm sure that exists in different industries. I mean, so I know what works for us. And, you know, and also, I mean, and definitely going to events that you're interested in, because, you know, when I was younger, I was asked to attend some industry events in an industry that I wasn't as excited about. And I think people could tell I was just showing up and mailing it in a little bit, because I needed to be there. So, you know, you definitely like it's important to be, you know, hopefully passionate, or at least interested in the stuff you're going to.
Yeah, people can tell for sure. Absolutely. By the way, you sent me some of those food cases, so thank you very much for that as well.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Right, because we're deal people, so we you know, we need litigators, we need employee benefits counsel, and so, you know, too. I mean, you know, we get referrals from other lawyers who know we're good at what we do, and I mean, and even now we're getting some very good referrals from some law school classmates who are at bigger firms, and, you know, they just know if there's a deal that's not a great fit for them, it really might be a good fit for us. So other lawyers are also really good sources of referrals. And I think, circling back to what you were saying earlier, even if you're a solo practitioner, if you're in a space where there's other lawyers who are doing different things, I mean, not only is there the collegiality, but also people will pass referrals back and forth. And I think an ancillary point to that is, as you're growing a practice, you need to, it's important to expand your practice areas, but you don't want to expand too far. Like, you got to be, I mean, ethically, you need to be competent in the legal services you're providing. And so it's important to not get drawn into practice areas where you really don't have experience, or where you really can't do a good job. So I think you need to stay in your lane and expand your lane, but also know where to draw the lines, and where you need to bring in somebody else with some additional expertise.
Yeah, that expansion of your competency has to be sort of gradual. It's sort of a dance to it because you can change practice areas. I mean, if you get into a practice area that you hate, you're not locked into it for life. It's not a life sentence, but you do have to figure out a way to make the transition and still be providing competent legal services. That's a really good point. And by the way, listen to me saying cases again. I did it again. I can't take the litigator out of myself, but that's why in our software we call them matters, to use a more universal term. That's what I should say. So you mentioned also receiving some referrals from your old firm, and that brings up another really good point, which is the importance of leaving well. If you're at a firm right now and you're thinking of hanging your own shingle, in an ideal world, you'll leave on really good terms and there'll be a great referral source for you. That's ideal. So if you can pull that off, certainly try.
Yeah. In this day and age, I think that we expect our associates to stay forever, of course. And we have such a good environment that they want to.
Yeah.
But
right.
but I don't think that a lot of bigger firms, especially, are expecting all their first years to become equity partners. And so they know there's going to be some turnover. And so, just, I think, handling your departure with grace, and trying to keep as many bridges open as you can, because you'll see those people again, and you want at least me, it was important to me that the people I used to work with, that I maintained a good relationship with them. There's one senior attorney there is still very much a mentor to me, and so he understood kind of my reasons for leaving, and he's been really encouraging on the entrepreneurial side of our practice. So really there's allies everywhere if you just cultivate them.
That's a great line. Okay, now for the research portion, is there any pie in the sky technology wish list item you have?
Yeah, so we're as with everybody, we're kicking the tires on some AI products. And one thing that's appealing to us and other business lawyers that we're talking to is having a closed source internal AI system that helps with document generation. Because we've got a really strong database of forms and agreements that we've used, and we're still sort of old school of what's the closest thing, type it out. But we think that there's some room to develop a closed system where we can enter in a few key prompts and get buyer friendly long form construction agreement.
Right. And you can be your own document bank, but that's a really, I think, appropriate use of AI, where it's just a matter of using your existing templates and figuring out the appropriate variables, and then you review its work. It's not doing the professional judgment, but it is sort of doing the grunt work based on your existing internal knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah. The goal would be to get to a good starting point a little bit faster, but then, the associate would still run through everything, and then the partner would still run through everything. So, yeah. And, and I'm sure we could talk for hours on issues with AI, but, because you obviously can't put client confidential information into Chat GPT. And, we're unfortunately in our practice starting to see more AI schlop get generated where, he's like, here's a term sheet, and it's like, this is not useful, or here's an agreement, and it's just awful. So you can, clients will kind of come to us with some problematic stuff that they or someone on the other side generated from AI. And we've got to say, I'm not going to work with this. We got to use our form. And that's, that's part of the client interview thing. Like, if a client wants to use, if clients I've drafted a form, can you stamp it for me? No, it's not. I can't do that. That's not how we practice. You're looking for someone else.
Yeah, I see those and I'm like, well, we're not going to be replaced yet.
Yeah. And I think, I think the finance boat, I think like associate level work and finance and stuff like that. I think a lot of that spreadsheet work that's a little bit more in danger, but man, there's nothing like a good human first year, second year, junior associate who can just, who can apply critical thinking skills. And especially for deals. I mean, I'm sure it's the same for litigation, but there's just a lot of like nuance to working with clients on the other side and just understanding that stuff, which really, I think like requires a human on the other end. So I'm not particularly worried about lawyers or legal work in AI, but I think there's some room for it to help us get a little bit more productive if we use it safely and ethically.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for people to find you, like you said, crestpointlaw.com, CRESTPOINTLAW.com, so they can find you there either for their deals or maybe a very talented third-year associate is going to reach out to join the team.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity to get in front of your people, and always fun to chat about running a law firm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to see it develop on your end. And thank you very much for your willingness to be here and talk to us today. Have a good one.